And these 17 Sustainable Development Goals have 169 targets. This is a global agenda adopted by the General Assembly of the United Nations, and the ILO was, in the course of the negotiations of this agenda, very much present, very much vocal, and that is the reason why we were able to have a specific goal, Goal 8, which is on decent work and economic growth, where the ILO has a lot of work to do in terms of delivering on its implementation. But Goal 8 is not everything that workers' organizations, employers' organizations, governments, the tripartite constituents of the ILO will have to look at in the context of the implementation of the SDG agenda, because labor market-related issues, social issues are reflected on many of the other Sustainable Development Goals. So this is a huge challenge for the ILO, and it is also a huge challenge for the tripartite constituents of the ILO. We have the Decent Work country programs, we have the Decent Work agenda, now we have got the Sustainable Development Goals. I mean, how does all this interrelate, and how do workers' organizations work with all these objectives, all these targets, all the indicators that are forcing is a question mark. ADL has been working very closely on the SDG implementation from an ACT-12 perspective. He has developed, and they will be telling us that in a minute, some training material that we have put at the disposal of the workers' organizations. We've done some training on that, but training is not enough. I think what we need to have on this short session is a view of where is South Asia on this, if anywhere at all at this stage. So I would like to ask Laxman Basnet to give us a short impression on his view and where he's sitting in terms of Sartruk, as what is the current progress in this sub-region regarding development, and how do you think that there are prospects and there are possibilities to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals?
Thank you very much, Sister Helena. I had a paper on this Sustainable Development Goal, but unfortunately I could not show it to you on this video because some technical problem. Okay, but anyway, I have to print out what I am going to do. What is a Sustainable Development Goal? It consists of 17 points, 17 goals. It consists of 17 goals. What are they? The first goal is the health, the social. I have divided it into 3 groups. The social is the health. This is what I think health is social. Education, drinking water, sanitation, waste management, social protection, that is social security and all other social protections. Sports, publication, these are health and all these are the social objectives of the thing. Then I see that there are other economic objectives too, like agriculture, animal husbandry. I'm talking about the development of all these things to according to 17 points to 169 points in 15 years. It started from 2015. If you remember, we had a Millennium Development Goal, MDG, from 2000 to 2015. And the report, worldwide report, is it's achieved something. It's not that it was completely negative. But South Asia was very poor. It was very poor. I remember when I was in trade union, national trade union, almost at the end of 2012 and 13, the goal was not reachable. Then we were called in. So let's see what we can do about it, and finally, start doing something. So, well, how could you do something in 2 or 3 years? The national moving the national agenda or international agenda too fast. So, agriculture and animal husbandry, transportation, industry, tax-related activities, local market management, slum management. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 are in social. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are in economic goals. And environment, forest and environment, that's another one. Water resources, birds and animals, climate change, biodiversity, and natural disaster management. These are the basic goals and how to tackle it. What we are, as a General Secretary of South Asian Regional Trade Union Council, what I am doing, Nepal has changed its perspective into a complete, federal structure. Altogether, Nepal has 753. I'm just talking the example of Nepal. 753 structures in Nepal. And out of that, 744 local level, including 4 metropolitan cities, 13 sub-metropolitan cities, 246 municipalities, and 481 village councils. We have that many. So 744 units are there. What we are trying to do is start a pilot project from this year in June. That what is the condition of these things in 1 or 2 village development corporations, which has a population of about 50,000 to 60,000, and 9 wards and 2 village level corporations. Let's see what happens. So, if we go into a village level development and try to work with this, first we have to find out what is the state of health there and how to improve it. To take the data of it and analyze it. What is the problem of in the village level? There is no medical officers, no doctors, nothing. But there are health posts which is not manned, and the medicines are not available. These are, I'm looking it into the aspect of 2 aspects. One is organizing. At present, like the previous session I said, we are organizing only 7% of or 6% of formal workers. Remaining are informal and migrant workers. So, make them aware that what government has promised you to do it in their constitution, like education for all, health for all, drinking water for all. So, is it available to you in the village level? So, each of the aspects will be dealt into 3 groupings. So, make one grouping into 2 or 3 committees and see, take the data of what is there. In the village level, we know in Nepal at least not more than 30% are school children. 10 years ago, there were 15 lakhs of children enrolled in the school. 10 years later, in class 10, there were only 482,000 appeared in class 10. So where did this 1 million, almost more than 1 million students go? They dropped out. Some dropped out in 2 classes, some dropped out in 5 classes, some dropped out in 7 classes, or some dropped out in just this test pass. This is what we call it in South Asia, test pass. So the result was how much? Out of 1.5 million, only 142,000 students passed. And 1.5 million is not 100% enrollment. 1.5 million is not 100% enrollment. So what has happened? Almost only 30% of the school born in a year are admitted. In 5 years later, they are admitted into schools. Not 100%, only 30%. Out of that 30%, only 1/3 is passing out. So there is a huge number of uneducated youth. Now we are talking about, in this seminar, we are talking about what? Technological change, upgrading. For anything of scaling, this is what the discussion is. I want to mix it with the migration too. This is what the migration has 22 points. Skill is one of the most important things. Somebody today said Abu Dhabi dialogue, Colombo process. I'm also in the Colombo process meeting. Next week I'm going to, in May, there's a meeting in Sri Lanka about Abu Dhabi dialogue, skill development. But how can you develop a skill when majority of the students are not in school? They don't even see. Those who go to school, they are out of school very soon. So this has to be changed. How do we change? Make partnership between 3: employer, government, and workers, and try to look into one village development corporation. What can we do? Okay, when we reach to a village development, in a one small village, there is 22 bricklanes, 22 bricklanes. In those 22 bricklanes, 60% are children working. So we sit together with the employer and say, okay, sir, the government says no children below 14 or 16. Why do you have 60% children working in the field? So what do I do? Okay, put them in school. But that is not the answer. Who is going to pay for them, their food and meals, if the parents have no school? So some kind of educational program, to assist the educational program, there has to be a program. So with some NGOs or international NGOs, we are running skill development for the parents. First we have to give them for the parents. Then only the children will be educated. For that, how can you improve the education? How can you improve the health, drinking water? You need employment in the villages. Otherwise, what happens? They come to the bigger cities and they create slum. Or they go into migration. Where do they go migration? The highest, those who have some money, they go to Europe and America and Australia and Japan. The second level goes to Middle East with 150,000 to 200,000 rupees deposits. The third level from Nepal. I'm talking about only Nepal. The case history of India could be little different. And for those who have some money, about 150,000 they can manage, they go to Middle East. If they don't have money, they come to India. And those who have nothing, they stay there for lifelong and work, 10 days, 15 days, a month, and do nothing. So this is a very good opportunity, okay, the government is, you have to create an atmosphere where you, government, and the employer come together. This is the idea of the social, what do you call it, SDG. Do I need to go? Where do I go? The UN doesn't listen to me. They are only listening to the NGOs. Only listening to the NGOs. They don't think the trade union can do it. So what I thought, let's see, my ILO can help me. So I said, okay, you fund a small pilot project in one of the villages, small pilot project. So 2 or 3 or 4 donors, like ILO or any other, I don't want to name it right now because ILO is our partner, so that's yeah. So we started from next month, because we have a convention in May 1st and 2nd and 3rd. So my people are not really ready to listen to anything but the convention. So after convention is over, we will start in create 3 first take data. Second, analyze how can you improve the situation in each aspect. How can you improve the situation? There are village experts, there are city experts. You don't have to bring people from center, or you do not have to fly people from across the Europe or America, because their knowledge in the village is not workable. You know, in the previous session I said, Nepal is importing 9 billion worth of foreign goods from inside Nepal. From food, agriculture, all these things. And it exports only 680 million rupees of worth of things. So balance of payment is bad. So what do you do with this? Only one thing you do. You see what can you easily produce. Nepal is an agricultural country. Nepal, I'll take 2 more minutes, not more. And I know, I can understand we are getting it. We have to replace the import. Then what kind of technology we can develop? We have to develop the local technology so that we can produce anything there. So there are two aspects coming up. One is SDG, and the other one is by the end of December there will be migration. I am very much surprised. Now ILO is not taking much interest in this year. We have one person appointed from March, that's Sabrina Nair. So that we have to take the initiative of ILO and mix the SDG and GCM, because the agenda is almost 60% same. Education, retraining, skills, all those things are together. So what we say is, with the agenda of migration and with the agenda of SDG, we take down to the grassroots level where try to empower the people and work together with them. The trade union and in the village is the best way to collective bargaining process, because for the construction workers there has to be a minimum wage fixed for the government workers, so that, and at least Nepal has declared that you will get the social protection. So we try to distribute the social protection, social security cards, things like that. Education and employment. You have to bring in some experts to see what can we do. With this, I think, I'm not going to say that it will be completely over, under control, but you can improve the situation at the village level, and if we get a good support from what we are looking for. It's not good support means it's not a huge money we are speaking, very small money for a 1 village and 2 village development corporation. where we want to run a pilot project. Some of them we have already received assurance that, okay, we will support you with that. With that, maybe in 2019, before end of the millennium, ILO's 100 years of function, we can produce a result there in 1 year and ask Madam Maria Helena that no, EXTRAB has to take this, because trade union activism is very limited, getting limited, but we have to go to the masses now. Masses is the only way to increase the agriculture worker, the village level informal worker. We have to target them, we have to educate them, we have to give them employment, we have to give them so many other things, which is 16 points. This is all I have to say. I think I have to satisfy the needs of the hour.
Thank you very much, Laxman Rajdit. I think you have made the point on some of the principles that should govern the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals and that have been part of our discussions in the course of today. I would say that the first one is that you cannot have development if you don't have a well-educated population. And a well-educated population means a population that has access to lifelong learning, that has access to basic education, that has access to primary education, but also that has access to the development of skills throughout one's life. We have been talking about the changes in the world of work. One of the best weapons, I would say, that workers and citizens can have is their capacity to evolve in a world of work that is changing so rapidly. And the best thing to do that is skills, it's qualifications. So I think your point got across in a very clear manner, and this has got to be at the basis of any sustainable development strategy, because education will also contribute to end poverty, it will contribute to reduce hunger in the world, it will contribute to good health and well-being, it will contribute to better gender equalities, etc., etc., etc. So that's the basis of any development strategy. The second point we've made is the fact that any sustainable development strategy will have to be based on a strong partnership. From an ILO perspective, of course, that strong partnership will have to be having at the basis the capacity of employers and workers' organizations and the governments to define what is the development model and what is the development strategy that they have in terms of being able to implement these 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And by doing that, you need to do it at the micro level, so at the village level, as Laxman was illustrating, but you also need to do it at the macro level. And one of the novelties that we have on Goal 8 is the fact that we're also talking about the need to have sustained, inclusive and sustainable economic growth. So the role of economic policies in the success of this agenda is fundamental, but at the same time, you also need to have full and productive employment and decent work for all. No matter how tiny the village you live in is, no matter how mono industry or mono culture it is, you need to make sure that, as we were saying this morning, no one is left behind. And the implementation of the SDGs is an attempt, I would say, yet another attempt of the international community not to leave anyone behind. Now, in order to do that, there are some framework conditions that need to be there. And again, Laxman has made a reference to one which is very, very important and which we've listened to already today as well. It's the whole debate around data generation. You will not be able to implement or to evaluate what are the results of the SDGs, and especially how successful you are in achieving the 169 targets if you do not have reliable data. And in that regard, we know that South Asia has problems in that regard. And I think that if there is one area that the trade union organizations need to be putting very strongly on the table, besides the fact of saying we need to be part of the definition, the implementation, and the evaluation of the agenda. We need to be part of the definition of the sustainable development model of our country. We also need to have data that is reliable, that is easily understood, and that allows us to evaluate where progress is or where progress is not, and why it is or why it is not. So I think that on the basis of this, after Ariel, okay, on the basis of all this, what I would like to ask Ariel, and Ariel has been working with the SDG agenda since it was conceived, I would say, and now in terms of looking at how the different countries in the world are embracing or not the agenda, I think it would be important for you to tell us from, your chair, where you have been observing these things, how do you see that this has got to be an all-encompassing agenda? This is not one where one policy will work if it is not put into, I would say, a cocktail of many policies that are working, all of them towards the same objective. So how do you see that framework and that political framework, and how do you see this contributing to all the things we've been discussing today? The challenges around the future of work. And then finally, how do you see trade unions prepared or not to be active players in the definition and in the implementation of the SDGs?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Maria Elena. I think those are very useful areas whereby we could address, what is it in the SDGs that allows us to, especially for the trade unions, what is it in the SDGs that would is important, that is necessary for to act on it, because I think from what Lakshman, what you have said is that it is about development, and I think that it will take another 13 more years to reach our own shared vision, our own shared agenda in terms of how we see development happening, that is aligned with the 17 goals, 169 targets, and 240 indicators, around 240. Such a big number. But maybe a lot of you are also asking, are we going to reach the SDGs? Are we even going to achieve them? And where are we? I mean, at least 2 years or 3 years after the implementation, after the adoption of the SDGs by the UN General Assembly in 2015, post the millennium, the MDGs, no? And in fact, I would not even want to delve into what happened to the MDGs, the eight Millennium Development Goals, because I think there is a shared what do you call that? There is a shared view in this, shared opinion in this room that nobody even understood, or nobody even had tracked the implementation of, or even how the progress that have been achieved under the MDGs. We don't even remember what those MDGs are. About health, about HIV/AIDS, about population, education, women, etc., etc. So now from 8 it has become even more, 17. No? So maybe a lot of you are asking. Yeah, I think from the report of the UN Secretary General in 2017, he said that there has been mixed progress. Mixed progress in the sense that countries have so far, and I think that includes many countries in the region, in the sub-region, many countries have only been able to align their own development plans into the SDG agenda, to the 17 goals. So alignment is already there. However, I think from a trade union perspective, from the workers' perspective, how can government declare that this alignment has happened, and what were the roles of unions there? And in many countries, for example, not in this region, but in some countries that we saw, there has been involvement of unions in shaping, and even in the exercise of aligning their development plans to the SDG agenda. I could talk about we can start talking about Indonesia, for example, a very good and a classic example in Asia, where there was a clear participation of the Indonesian trade unions in shaping not only the goals, but also the way in which targets are reflected and shared by the trade unions, and also via a process where civil society, governments, and also other development actors were present. So for Indonesian unions, it was clear. Yeah, I mean, they are 220 million population, you know, and then unions are also like maybe sharing the same characteristics here. There are many national centers, but in the particular area of the SDGs, when they talk to the government, they talk as one. They talk and they engaged with the government, especially because they wanted to see how SDG 8, for example, SDG 8 is about inclusive, equitable, decent work, economic growth for all. So the promotion of it is crucial. So the trade unions in Indonesia were quite happy that, you know, the government and there was involvement. Of course, it's not a desirable involvement, but at least they were able to shape this. But then again comes the question of capacity. No? So the capacity issue was also was there. You know, how are trade unions able to understand this agenda, and from their own point of view, how are they able to align themselves in engaging with the various development actors, development players in the SDG, in shaping the SDG agenda? And I think that is where, you know, institutions like the ILO could come in, and we were prepared to provide not just and it's not as if we asked Indonesian trade unions to you know, what can we do for you? It was the Indonesian unions who actually told us that we need help in terms of you know, understanding this from where we are, and also to have this, and also to ask for spaces and to influence the agenda, and to make sure that this agenda is something that we can push, and we can talk to the governments, and we can report on, or we can even mobilize around. No? So I think that's important. Capacity was important, and that the ILO was prepared to do that because there were some readily available materials. Not that we made it because there was an Indonesian request, but because there was already something which the ILO, from the beginning of the negotiations of the post-2015 agenda up to the present, we were already coming up with these materials, and then the trade unions using a vantage point that we can provide a reference tool for unions to negotiate and to engage on the SDG agenda, especially on the goals and targets that are near to them, that are closest to trade union work. So that is a classic case, that the will of the trade unions was important, and also the way the government was also willing, no, to engage and to because they recognize the important role that unions play in that whole major groups, no, including trade unions, women, children, etc., and especially because the recognition that goal 8 was closest to trade union. But it's not about only goal 8. We also talk about goal 5 on equality, gender equality. We also talk about goal 10, where migration is. We could also, there is also goal 16, which is about responsible institutions. And in goal 16, and this is very important for trade unions, in goal 16 is the only goal with an indicator that has a language, or that is referring to trade unions. And it is under goal SDG 16.10.1, where it measures number of journalists, human rights activists, and trade unions who have been murdered, kidnapped, victims of torture, disappearances, etc. And here I think is a space where I mean, I'm not saying that in India these are all happening, but I could imagine that in some of the countries and some of the trade unions have an interest in reporting these occurrences. So goal 16, I think, and then also of course goal 1 on poverty, and goal 13 on climate change. So I think these are the very important goals. But for example, do we know how they are measured? I mean, they are measured, for example, via what Maria Helena said, by the availability of data. And here I think is an important role for unions, perhaps to see how data availability and reliability and accessibility is present in the countries. Because without reliable data, there cannot be any report on the SDG implementation and the SDG commitment, and data is important. But of course, we recognize that there is, and here I think is an area for unions to push for better reforms in terms of data availability and data accessibility. The other area, of course, is and this data is used to report. For example, there is a thematic review which is being done every year in New York. It's called, under the auspices of the UN Economic and Social Council, it's called the High Level Political Forum, the HLPF. The 2017 one is going to happen, 2018 one is going to happen in July, and they will review goals around water, sanitation, and industry, and also a little on transportation. Those 6, 7 goal SDG 6, 7, etc. that is related to more on water and utilities and a little on the environment. So the thematic review is important because it allows agencies like the ILO to consult and to engage with the constituents on what could be reportable. Importantly, for next year in 2019 is that for trade unions and for the ILO social partners is that goal 5, goal 8, goal 10, and goal 16 will be up for review in New York, in the HLPF. But it doesn't just happen in New York. Prior to New York are regional symposium. The one which was in Asia was done in March, and normally it is done around that time. The UNSCAP organizes a regional symposium which analyzes implementation and hears out from the different groups their assessment of the implementation. And do you know how many people were present in this year's? How many trade unions were actually present in this year's regional symposium for Asia Pacific, which was to report on these goals? There were only about 7 trade unionists out of 350 participants of the regional symposium. I think it's a very small number, but probably what could be important is that for next year, since goal 8, goal 10, and goal 16 will be reviewed, and also the goals on climate change, goal 13, there has to be a bigger voice and a bigger involvement of unions to participate at national assessment exercises on the SDGs, the Asia Pacific exercise on the SDGs, and also in New York eventually around July. So that's the thematic review process, where perhaps even from the ILO, within the ILO, we are also preparing that type of report to the ECOSOC on the implementation on how we have actually been measuring implementation of these SDGs. So for next year, this is important. Another area where trade unions could play a role is what is called participation in sustainable development councils. These are bodies which have been existing from I think from 1995 when after the Rio summit there was this massive attempt to the social summit as well in Copenhagen, where there was a massive attempt by countries to develop or to even create structures that will deal with sustainable development in the respective countries. I know that after some time, there's some disengagement on that, but I think a lot of countries, for example, I can mention in South Asia, some of the Sustainable Development Councils are still present, and where trade unions have been a member of. And these is where the influencing, the measuring of implementation of the SDGs could play a role, and where trade unions could play a role, and see whether the kind of reports, the sustainable development reports that countries produce are reflecting the real type of development that exists in the country. Because I don't know whether we are aware of these the data that where government picks up and reports on, because I think that in many reports that we've seen, it always paints a very rosy picture of what is happening in the country. So National Sustainable Development Report, and then of course voluntary national reviews, and these are called the VNRs. There have been a number of countries each year that submits their report, and I think India submitted in 2016, if I'm not mistaken, a voluntary national report that says that in India we have aligned our even Sri Lanka, I think was 2017, or there was Sri Lanka also reported. So they say which development program or which development actions or which development programs they have done that have aligned with the SDGs. So how many of us know about the voluntary national reports? I mean, we did an assessment in ACTRA. We looked at about 82 voluntary national reports, and sadly, there were only 17, less than 20 mention of trade unions being able to contribute in voluntary national reports. So very, very few. This year, if you look at the website of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, you will find the countries which are up for review. There are 48 countries, 7 in Asia that will report. My computer is blank, so I can't tell which countries are reporting, but I think it's a very important point where trade unions have to be active, where governments or national sustainable development committees or councils are reporting on their implementation of the SDGs. So, the thematic reviews, VNRs, and also within multilateral institutions like the ILO or UN agencies, they are also producing their reports. For example, they are contributing to reporting of under the SDG and SDG 1610 together with OHCHR. And within the ILO, we have 14 indicators that we are custodian agencies. Custodian agencies means that we are developing a methodology and a metadata and also a strategy whereby we can out of reports and out of data that has been submitted to us, we can report on progress or not of meeting the commitments under the SDGs. So I think I've laid out a lot of areas for trade union involvement, but I think it requires for us to be more proactive in the sense, because we've been saying that in this new engagement process that the SDG requires, it's not just important that we wait for the UN or for the National Development Agency, whatever it is in India. I think it's NITI Aayog, or in other it's a planning commission. You don't wait for them to knock on our doors, on your doors. it takes a proactive role, a proactive engagement to present, what could be important for the trade unions in terms of making some advancements, making progress, and also holding governments committed to meeting their obligations and meeting the goals of the SDG of the SDG agenda. So I think again, it requires political will, which a lot of that exists here, I hope, from the unions. From the government, maybe there will be, but I think it relies on how trade unions will be able to push and influence that. Capacities. We are here, there's a strong capacity that exists here, and we can just probably harness that and enhance that. The issue of data, updated data, where we could, I don't know how, but I think it's important that the data that exists and that is reported on is reflecting on the kind of situation, the kind of context that unions would like, and of course the issue of accountability framework. And we've laid out, I've identified where entry points could be in terms of how you can make the government and also, of course, the UN agencies accountable for meeting their commitments under the SDG agenda, and the whole issue, and lastly, the issue of partnerships, because the SDG agenda will not just rely on a single agency or a single organization approach, but it requires, different actors, development players, coming together and having an agreement that this is the way and this is the proper approach to meet the commitments under the SDG agenda. So I end there, and maybe add some more on the next one.
You wanted to come back on?
Yeah, I just want to very shortly. There are 4 programs going on from 2015, 16, 17, 18. One is SDG, the other one is migration, which will start from next year after adoption in January. Last year we adopted something in Bali. That's Asian Development Goals, Asian what is it called? Asian Development Goals. ILO has adopted Bali Declaration that it has about 15 points. That's the third one. And the fourth one is government has their own programs. Migration, SDG, Bali Declaration, and government has 4 programs, their own programs. I'm not talking about the central government, I'm talking about the village, ground level government. If you put them together, it comes to around 15 programs together, only 15 programs together, 15 points together. And if we try to experience in one of the villages pilot project for 1 year or 2 years, certainly that will encourage us, that will increase our membership, increase our capacity of the strengthening the trade union, and we have to go into the masses now. If we look into only the organized and industrial workers alone, industrial workers are informalized now. So we have to go into the in an area that we go to the masses of the people. That is the only way. This is all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Brother, can I share that? 2 minutes on
Just a second, okay? We have to finish in 8 minutes maximum, and I would really like to open the floor. So I'm gonna give you the floor for a very short comment. But the only thing I want to say is that what we have been trying to get across from this part of the table is that this is a serious agenda, and it's that what we're trying to do is to give you a wake-up call for those who are not awake yet to the fact that this is going to become, it is already an integral part of the development strategy and of the development agenda at the global level. The challenge is, how do we bring together all the processes that are ongoing at this stage, and how do we make sure that this time the SDG, unlike the Millennium Development Goals, at least achieve a part of the objectives that have been agreed upon. And don't forget that this is not an agenda exclusively for the developing world, as it was the case of the Millennium Development Goals. This is an agenda for everyone. So everyone has got to deliver regarding the objectives, the goals, and the indicators. And there's a lot of them. So we want you to be alert on this. And as Ariel said, go and knock on the door of the government in order to say that unions have got to be part of the process. And that it's not just civil society understood as NGOs that are partners in the process of the SDGs. Now I'm going to give you the floor for 1 minute.
First of all, I thank you very much for the ILO topmost official to
Yes.
First of all, I thank you very much on behalf of Hindmadhu Sabha to Madam Director S.A. Maria and Brother Ariel, who has explained the very important, very much concerned to the working class, the Sustainable Development Goal of 2030. I want to, within a few minutes, I want to share with you, up till now, the Government of India has not invited any trade union for discussion on this important agenda of UN 2030. And I want to share that 30% of the population of India living below poverty line. It means they have they are not able to get two-time meals. How to eliminate poverty from the earth up to 2030, that is dream for us. And another thing, the education to all. I don't know when our poor children will get the education, because in my country, Government of India has decided to offload the education into the commercial field. And in the government schools, there is no teacher, no room, no sitting arrangement for poor people. That's why they have no money to send their children to the school. And I don't know when this education they will get. And another thing, you are mentioning to eliminate the poverty and create a decent job. We have on record 40 million unemployed youth getting all type of education in their hand, waiting for job. This is the official figure. And I don't know when they will get the job. And every year 20 million youth after passing college and ITI, they are entering into the labor market for job. But there is no creation of job, but jobs are created in the informal sector. Those jobs are indecent job. They are not getting even a minimum wage. And another issue to sustainable goal is providing water to all. In my country, in Delhi capital, the water is going so deep. Now government has banned for bore to getting the water from the earth. And there is no supply of water for drinking, potable water for the people in the capital. What to talk about the remote? And all these type of sustainable goal very much concerned to the poor people and very much concerned to the trade union. I wrote a letter to the Labour Minister, waiting for reply up till now. I advised him to call the meeting, urgent meeting, to discuss this sustainable goal with the stakeholders. But up till now, I have not received the acknowledgement, but talk of reply. And these are the facts, reality on the ground level. And I am thankful to you because this is a very important subject. 1 hour is not sufficient to discuss this important sustainable goal in such type of a seminar of ILO. I request to ILO that for this subject, India director should call a meeting, joint tripartite meeting on this subject, so that if government is not inviting, ILO should come forward and have a 2-day discussion on this important subject. And I will very much thankful to the ILO. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We got the message very clearly. The first thing that we will do is to convey your concerns to the director of the ILO office in New Delhi, and then we will build from there, and see how we can assist not just the unions, because this is not just a union issue, but how can we assist the constituents of the ILO in India to make sure that this is part of the agenda, because as you were saying, this is part of the integrated agenda where you need to make several policies work towards the same objective, and not just one policy working to the right and the other policy working to the left. So there's got to be an integrated approach, there's got to be an integrated set of policies that will allow for the SDGs to be implemented. Of course, no one in this room has got any illusions that all the 17 goals will be fully respected and implemented by 2030. But it's important to launch processes. It's important to launch processes where the social partners are an integral part of. And I think that was our objective with this short discussion. I know it's a short discussion, but I also know that everyone is tired after a very, very long day. So I would suggest that we finish here. Ariel, Laxman, myself, we are at your disposal until tomorrow if you have any specific questions regarding the SDGs. But I would propose that we now call it a day. Thank you very much for all the very good and very participatory debates we had in the course of the day. I know that tomorrow morning we will start at 9:30. I don't know if Ariel has got any other technical announcement to make.